Okay, drawing skills for elementary art methods part 2 here. So we're talking about how to take lines and values and create an illusion or a drawing that's actually going to look like it makes sense. So a couple of ways that we can do this is to first start with the contour and think about simple shapes. So like when I look at this figure here, this little structure, it's something that I found at a thrift shop. I thought it looked really cool. I think that a circle would fit nicely in the body of the bird here. And so I like to demonstrate how to use really basic shapes to create more complex forms. And so here I've sort of represented that. And you notice that I sketch several times. I go with a loose hand because I don't want to have to like make a perfect contour and then erase it and start again. So there's a lot of lines here that are right, many are wrong, and I'll erase the ones that are incorrect later. So I'm looking at this thinking again, circle is a good way to represent this bird, and another good way to represent the neck would be kind of like with a trapezoid type shape. So I start thinking about how that trapezoid type shape might exist inside of here. And again, I'm going sketchy, which is fine because I'll clean it up later. So I think that I've represented that pretty well. Now looking at the head of the bird, I'm gonna go with another circle and I'm gonna kick that out here. Because as I look at that, it looks like it probably needs to be on this side. I'm gonna expand his body out a little bit more. Then I'm gonna think about the beak a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw in a triangle shape here. So again, it doesn't look like a bird now, but the idea is that I can use these simple shapes to represent something complex like this. So now I'll start thinking about like, what does the bottom look like? And I'll change those shapes accordingly. Before I do that though, I think I want to erase off a lot of these extraneous lines here that are unimportant. They're just planting marks more or less. And so kids sometimes get really confused if they leave all that stuff in there. It's a really great way to teach drawing to students. I had a lot of success when I taught elementary school with this, and the kids really understood how to start looking at complex things and thinking of them as more basic shapes, because they learn that early on, and you can use that as a good scaffolding basis to show them how to draw that stuff. So now that I have that, I can create a more informed contour. So looking at my subject, I can start to really follow all of the shape, or the outside of the shape. I'm using a little darker pencil here now. And then I can start looking at things like texture. Like I have this weird kind of texture coming up on this side that looks like it would be well represented here. Looks like the eye's about in this location. His body would probably have a little shading in this area because I see it's darker here, be darker out here. That's a good way to create these more complex forms out of basic shapes. So then what I would do, and you can't see this unfortunately, but I would place it in front of me and I would start to look at all of the values and try to shade those as best I could. So I'm gonna move to a different way of representing things. This is one that I like to start with my kids on. So either select something in your house that you think that you could try to draw out based on contour and shading that would be complex and that you could make out of simple shapes, again, like circles, rectangles, triangles, different stuff like that. Another great way to do this is to start with a very simple shape, like a circle. And so I like to have my students trace a template. And then this is a great shading exercise for them. What I like to do then is think about our value scale that we had before with the 1, 2, 3, 4 values. And then I want to think about things like, where's the light coming from? So I like to have them draw a little sun graphic in the corner like this. And that means that all of the light is going to hit this side of the sphere. So I don't want this to look like a circle, I want it to look like a sphere as such. So that means that this area should be really pretty light. To get this to look dimensional though, I've got to add some shading on the edges. And so using my value scale practice that I created before, I'm going to kind of go in this little area here. I'm going to sketch out a very light sort of border here because I know it should probably be darkest through here. And so knowing where that should be, I can start to really manipulate those values so that they start to create a volumetric form. And again, thinking about this as a sphere rather than a circle helps me to understand, and I'm going to flip it around because I like to use the natural arc of my hand here. It's going to help me understand that I need to be making marks that kind of conform to this outside shape. So you notice I'm not making really straight marks, I'm making sure they're fairly curved. And then as I'm going through, I'm starting to use a little bit of scribble gesture, really lightly, to kind of build this up and control my value. And then as I start getting closer and closer to my light source, I know that I want to keep a good highlight out here, so I'm just going to sketch something real light in there. I know that I won't put any graphite there. But now I'm going to start moving into like maybe the 2s and the 3s in terms of value. I want this to be a little lighter as it comes up. So I'm using kind of a hatching technique now. But I want to keep it as light as I can. So I'm going to cross hatch a little bit over it. And as I see this area should be darker so that it kind of helps show this progression, I'm going to come back over it more. And I'm going to deepen this area as it comes through. And by building these values up slowly, I don't see lines so much as I see values. And again, I favor the scribble gesture. I just like it that way, and I'm really making small marks like this. It's very, very tiny on top of there. Again, to build it up slowly. Now as it gets closer to this side, a lot of people think, well, this should be really dark, but a lot of times you have light that bounces off of the surrounding area. What we really want to do is we want to extend a good shadow underneath there to make it look like it's sit down. So I usually think about where's the bottommost spot of this, and what's that light going to look like as it hits this side, and then what kind of a shadow is that going to push out this way. So looking at this, I'm trying to make it go the same direction, and that kind of helps me create a sense of space. With my college students, I have them calculate what they think is the absolute bottom of this thing. It gets a little bit dicey then, but we can get really close with younger kids, and it's still successful, and they feel empowered by it. And then they can use these tools as they start to observe things around them, and they try to draw them out more realistically. So now I'm going to come back down here, and I'm going to add a little bit more value. Again, I'm looking for like a 4 through here, maybe a 3 here, maybe a 2 here. So I think here I'm going to go for like a number 2 value, like what we did on our value scale. So I can kind of compare my last drawing if I want to. That'll help me. But I should have good differences in value to create this illusion of dimension in here. A lot of times I get back from my drawing, evaluate it from at least 5 feet away, and that helps me not see all these little lines, and it looks a lot more concrete in terms of where the values exist and how they blend into one another. Drawing is a practice. It's like riding a bike. If you stop doing it, you'll lose it. So it's not this talent that people are just born with. It's about seeing, and it's about evaluating things and then trying to record or copy those things on two-dimensional paper. And once I have that, a lot of people like to smudge and smooth things out. I don't usually have my students do that because I'd rather have them use their pencil to control. But a real easy way to do this in elementary school is to have them just take their finger and just rub over the darkest areas, or the spots where it should be the deepest. And that kind of helps smooth those values out a little bit. However, a lot of kids take this too far, and then they end up like making the whole thing the same value, because once you have a significant amount of graphite on your finger, it's gonna blend into the paper. So these are 2 good ways to create convincing drawings in terms of how we want them to look objectively. This one I could shade more, spend a little bit more time on it. Again, it's hard for me to show you this, but as I'm looking at this form, there's a lot more value on these sides. And because that bird has so much texture in here, I'd want to draw all that texture if I could. Little kids have a hard time with that, but if they can make a basic representation of, say, like an animal or something that they see every day, it can be very helpful for them, and it could build confidence for the kids as well. There's another way that this can be done to where you can create a good volumetric look with pencil, and that is to trace around something that we recognize pretty easily, like a hand. You've probably seen this lesson plan out on the internet. A lot of people do this one. This is good for markers too. But have the kids trace their hand like this, and then when using different types of line, they can create dimension out of this by just thinking about how it should be lightest across here, darker on the edges. Or you can have them use cross contour lines to help represent how those values would look as they come across. I like to have my kids shade after doing this. Older kids should use more line work. That way they can really experiment with how that volume is going to look. But as long as these lines are curved, it's going to help to show more dimension in this. A lot of my friends who teach elementary school will have the students create straight lines between these two, because that helps to show the illusion as well. Because that shows that it's on a flat plane here, whereas this is curved. So if I were going to have my kids do this, then I would have them practice shading on here as well. And I'll just give you an example on one part. So what I would do is go through here and start dark on one edge, dark on the other edge. And then I usually have my students pull a little highlight out of the middle with their eraser. If we do that again on the next layer, again, lightening up with my pencil a little bit. Looks like that should be a little darker. It kind of helps students control value and create dimension. So if you would do this through several of your fingers, it would really look volumetric. So choose something, whether it's the basic sphere shading or a complex object that you want to try shading and drawing with contours on your own, or try doing the hand technique where you trace around it and control your value so that it looks volumetric. So as long as it looks 3D, I think you're successful. Good luck and have fun with this.